Welcome to the training video on how to conduct key informant interviews. The training today will be facilitated by Diane and Kate from the TSO of World Vision International. The training will cover steps in how to conduct key informant interviews, tips on taking notes during key informant interviews, how to use the KII note-taking form and data collection tracking table, and to practice through role play and record feedback on the piloting of the tools. So let's get started. The steps to consider when conducting key informant interviews. So we want to first prepare for the key informant interviews ahead of time. We want to understand the purpose of conducting the key informant interviews. What information are we trying to probe out of the respondents? We need to really understand this because we don't want to just go through the questionnaire and the tools and just ask questions for the sake of asking questions. We want to understand as we probe the answers that the respondents are providing us with to really understand the objective of the evaluation.
The evaluation objective for our specific project evaluation is to assess the effect and impact of the interventions on the target beneficiaries with a special focus on child well-being and sustainability of the changes.
We should also familiarize yourself to the interview tool or questionnaire. So we can do this by pilot testing the tool and revising the tool as needed so the questions are clear to the target respondents. And it's also from practice through things like role play. We also want to understand the note-taking template you will record the key informant information or the data on. It's helpful to familiarize yourself to the headings and the format. Also understand the cultural barriers to be considered when conducting the interview. Always be polite and respectful. For phone interviews, call the respondent and agree on a date or time for the interview prior to the interview date. We also want to work in pairs for KIIs. There should be one interviewer and one recorder. The recorder could use a laptop and fill in the answers using the note-taking document provided. Please do not use a different document or change the headings of the note-taking document provided. And Kate will be taking us through in more detail of this note-taking document later. Also have all the equipment and tools prepared prior to calling the respondent, such as an audio recorder, a phone for phone interviews, the questionnaire tools, the note-taking document with an archival number, and the long consent form. I would highly recommend to save the note-taking documents for each respondent with the archival number ahead of time. And if you already have certain background information, you can fill that in the note-taking document ahead of time to save time, especially if you're doing these interviews over the phone. Also, practice through role play or pilot the tool and revise the questionnaire and translation as needed. Record how much time the interview takes during your role play. And ensure you have the complete list of respondents you need to interview. When conducting KIIs, call the respondent and introduce yourself. Confirm the name of the person on the phone to make sure that he or she is the person you want to speak with for the interview. If it is, ask if they're in a safe place to talk right now for a 30-minute phone interview. If respondents say no, then ask for a different time you could call to complete the interview. Read the long verbal consent form to the respondents. If participants agree, here is an example of a long consent form. You can fill in the name of the participant on the line over here and circle yes. And then the enumerator can sign on this line here, indicate the date and time of when it was signed, and then you can also write your name, the enumerator's name, on the second line. Now read the introduction of the questionnaire tool and ask if you can record your discussion, which should be included in the introduction section of the tool. If the respondent agrees to the audio recording of the interview, put your phone on speakerphone and use another device to record the interview. The other device can be another phone or another recording device. And if this doesn't work, another option is using Skype. You can call another phone using Skype, but you must have Skype credit, and then you can record the conversation on Skype, and the recording will be saved on the computer. Ask each of the questions in the tool and clarify the question if the respondent does not seem to understand the question. Take note of the questions that may require revising after each interview. Also, record the time of when the interview starts and ends at the top of the note-taking form, which Kate will take us through. After conducting key informant interviews, on the same day, if possible, reread the transcription and use the audio recording to fill in any information that may have been missed. Please, please, once again, I want to emphasize, do not change the note-taking document. Make sure you are using the note-taking document when taking the notes, and do not add any additional tables or change the wording of the headings. This is because this document will be imported into a qualitative data software where the data will be analyzed. So you must use the note-taking document that we provide. Translate the transcription into English word for word. Please do not summarize while translating, as this will affect the qualitative data analysis. Please send an urgent email with feedback to the project team leaders and highlight the questions that need revisions in the wording or in the translation, so changes could be made quickly across all the questionnaire tools. Next, I will hand it over to Kate, and she will take us through the different tips for taking notes during KII. Over to you, Kate.
Thanks, Diane, and thanks for that great summary and tips for doing key informant interviews. In the PowerPoint, you will see that there are 2 slides about tips for how to take key informant interviews, and I would ask that you refer back to the PowerPoint for those tips. However, for this video, I'm also going to walk you through the key informant interview note-taking guide so you can see it for yourself of how it's laid out and what is the best way to fill it.
So for our Starting Strong project, if we want to generate the ID number, we need 4 pieces of information: the interviewer ID number, the district's name, whether it's a focus group discussion or key informant interview, and then the focus group discussion or key informant interview number. These 4 pieces of information can be used to then generate the ID number. For example, if my interviewer ID number is 1, I would write 1. And then if I'm conducting the focus group discussion in the district's name SOT, I'll write SOT. And if I am conducting a focus group discussion, I would write FGD. And let's say it's the second focus group discussion I am conducting, then I would write 2. So the ID number at the end becomes 1 SOT FGD 2.
As you go through the note-taking guide, you will see that it is exactly the same as the interview guide. The only difference is the heading, and you will see that it is colored in blue. As Diane had mentioned, it is essential that you do not change the format of these headings. Do not change the color, do not add words, or change any type of the word form. When you are doing the interview, you can use shorthand to complete the answers that you receive from the interviewees. Do not worry during the interview about trying to capture everything that the interviewee is saying. That is why you have the audio recording. The main thing is that as you are taking the notes, that you have a way to go back and remember what your shorthand was. So if you're using abbreviations, make sure that there are abbreviations that you can remember what it stands for. As you continue going through the note-taking guide, you will ask the questions in the same as you have in the interview guide. But one thing particular of note in the note-taking guide is at the very end, there's a place for you to write the note-taker observations. This is anything that you have observed during the interview about the person's body language, their mood, their attitude, anything that wouldn't necessarily be picked up in the word transcript. After you are done with the interview, we strongly suggest that within 24 hours, you go back and you fill out a note-taking guide with more information in detail. So you can use a recording to fill out anything that you couldn't quite capture during the interview itself. As many of you may know, when you do qualitative evaluations, what is key is getting from the participants in their own words how they answered a question. And that is why we ask that you do not summarize what they said in your words, but you use their own words to the best extent as possible. The other reason why it's important that you do the transcription within 24 hours is if there was anything that came up in the interview, such as new questions or questions that were not clear, that needs to be communicated as soon as possible to the other data enumerators. If there are additional questions that need to be added, that needs to be communicated so that future interviews are also using those additional questions.
So this is the recording tracking table that we will be using. So you will see on the left-hand side number for just the number for the table, and then the archival or ID number, which I just explained. The category, so whether it's for caregivers, VHSGs, CNWs, OD chief, HC chief, or project staff, the date of the survey, when it was taken, interviewer name, the note taker name, the translator name, the gender of the interviewee, and this is only for KIIs, the marital status of the interviewee is also only for KIIs, and then the main occupation for the interviewee, which is only for KIIs again. And then you would indicate when the date of the file that was submitted.
All of this needs to be sent in a separate file to TSO. We suggest that you use MS Teams to fill out this form so that it can be filled out in real time, and TSO can also be reviewing this as you are completing it, and we can also track how well the key informant interviews are being conducted and what is the status. That is all for tips on how to complete the note-taking form. Back over to you, Diane.
Now I'd like you to practice through a role play and pilot the tool. Please pair up with another enumerator you'll be working with as a pair for the rest of the data collection. Divide up the focus group discussions and KIIs that are needed to be completed. Here is a table and the list of the different focus group discussions and the key informant interviews that need to be completed. So there's 3 focus group discussions, 3 VHSGs, 1 key informant interview for the OD chief, and then 6 key informant interviews for the HC chief, and then 3 KIIs for the CNWs. You will see for focus group discussions, we recommend having about 6 to 8 participants per FGD. And we also recommend that the same people who are conducting the FGDs conduct all of the FGDs. The people conducting the KIIs stick to the KIIs, if possible. Please take note of the questions that need to be clarified as you conduct the role play and provide the TSO with feedback as soon as possible so it could be revised if needed. Please take note of the time that it takes to complete the interviews and let us know with any feedback. Thank you. And that brings us to the end of our presentation today.